BRICS is very important. BRICS has continuously expanded since it was first founded in 2009. It now has 20 different countries, including 10 members and 10 partners. And together, they actually represent slightly over half of the global population, 56% of the world population. And when you measure their collective GDP at purchasing power parity, it's 44% of the global economy, close to half.
Yeah.
So this is a very important bloc in the world. And I think it is more mature today because as it's expanded, the central mission that BRICS has, I think, has become clearer, which is about, one, reforming global governance institutions, and two, in particular, reforming the international financial system so developing countries can pursue their own paths of development and have other opportunities, and they don't have to follow along with the old Washington consensus. Back in the 1990s, this is what the U.S. told the rest of the world that it had to follow, and it used its influence in international financial organizations to impose that model. China and India and Russia and Brazil and other countries in BRICS are saying, no, we want a more multipolar world, and in order to build this more multipolar world, we need to reform existing international institutions to make them more democratic and also create alternative institutions like the BRICS New Development Bank.
And Benjamin, with that central mission in mind, the terms openness, inclusiveness, win-win cooperation, they all come to mind, and they were key terms in President Xi's speech. Can these values drive the kind of cooperation that you're talking about, really needed for further global development?
Yeah, obviously it's difficult because all countries have their own interests, but I think this is the only way to move forward is these countries have to find a way to collaborate, and especially on issues of common interest. And in the case of BRICS, I think this is actually becoming easier and easier despite the political differences. For instance, China and India have had differences, but what we've seen in the past few years is they've grown closer together despite their differences, and they've united on their common interests, which again is the pursuit of a more multipolar world, and in particular reforming these international institutions. We've seen these institutions have been paralyzed, especially because unfortunately, the United States has weaponized these institutions to advance its interests, and Trump is the most clear example of that, but that was also happening under Biden through, for instance, the paralysis in the World Trade Organization and the appellate body. So these countries, despite their differences, have come together and realized that they have more in common than they have differences, and they're working together to reform these institutions, and BRICS and the SCO, I think, are some of the main platforms to build this more multipolar world. I think this is a historic moment.
Yeah, I think you're right. They realize they have much more in common than apart, even with those competing interests. So how can BRICS safeguard the international economic and trade order, especially with these tensions in trade relations that you've been talking about? There is clearly a strong belief among the organization that the Trump administration is in the process of turning the global economy on its head.
Yeah, well, Trump himself has said it very clearly, or Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, just gave a speech a few days ago in which he says, I don't care about the UN. So the U.S. is making it clear that it's against multilateralism, and China and other countries, especially in BRICS, are now becoming the defenders of multilateralism, and I think that their strategy makes perfect sense. It's what I would call it a mixture of inside and outside strategy. So the inside strategy is to reform the existing institutions. The Tianjin Declaration of the SCO Summit made it clear that they are defending the United Nations-based world system based on the UN Charter, with its emphasis on non-interference and respect for sovereignty. But they also emphasize that the UN needs to be reformed because the Global South, which represents the global majority, does not have enough representation in these bodies, which are still very heavily dominated by the West and the U.S. in particular. So, and they also call for reforming the IMF and the World Bank. That's the inside strategy. The outside strategy is also to create new institutions, like the SCO is creating a new development bank. BRICS has the New Development Bank. There's also the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So these are new institutions that they want to strengthen as well, so they can work from both angles to make sure that they're as successful as possible.
Good stuff. Benjamin Norton, founder and editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report. Thanks so much for your insight.
Thanks for having me.